A father is someone who raises you, cares for you, protects you. But what do you call a man when your own father, the man who gave you life, takes the life of your son? I know the answer. You call him a monster. And a monster is what he became the day he killed my Raphael. My name is Mary Conroy. I'm 79 years old, and I live in Fairview, right here in the heart of Kentucky. I'm sitting on the same porch where I watched my son take his first steps, where he played with toy cars, where I once dreamed of seeing his children running around. Today, this porch only holds memories, and this story I've carried in my heart for 43 years. I was born in 1944 in a simple house near the old market. My father, Raymond Conroy, was known throughout Fairview. He worked at the local slaughterhouse since he was young, started as a helper, and became the head butcher. Everyone respected Ray Conroy, hardworking man, helpful, always ready to lend a hand. But nobody saw what happened when he closed the door at home. My mother, Elizabeth, was a seamstress. A good one, mind you. She made wedding dresses that looked like works of art, hand-embroidered pieces that took months to finish. A pretty girl from rural Pine Ridge, she met my father at a 4th of July celebration and fell for him. They married quickly. She was 18, he was 25. They were happy in the early years, at least that's what she told me. Drinking crept into my father's life slowly, like a snake approaching its prey. First, it was just on weekends, with friends. Then it spread to weekdays. When I was born in 1944, he was already drinking every blessed day. And with the drink came his other face, the violent man my mother discovered too late. I remember my earliest memories. I must have been 4 or 5. The sound of the gate slamming, the dragging of feet in the hallway, the smell of whiskey mixed with cow blood from the slaughterhouse. My mother would send me to my room, but the thin walls hid nothing. The screams, things breaking, her muffled crying after it was all over. I grew up learning to read the warning signs. The way he stepped through the door, his tone of voice when he called my mother. Even the silence had meaning. When it was too quiet, that's when it was worse. The storm would come full force. Before I continue, I want to thank all of you listening. It's difficult to tell this story, but it needs to be told. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's good to know my voice is reaching far. And if you can, leave a like and subscribe to this amazing channel, Grandparents' Tales, that gives voice to all the grandparents across America. Each person who subscribes is like a hug that reaches me here. My mother tried to protect me as best she could. She'd hide me in the closet when he came home too drunk, send me to the neighbor's house with any excuse, but there wasn't always time. I remember one night, I was about 7, I was helping her embroider a First Communion dress. The table was covered with white thread, delicate fabric, weeks of work. My father came home earlier than usual, already staggering. He saw everything spread out and exploded. Wasting money on this garbage. No wife of mine needs to work. In one movement, he threw everything on the floor. The dress my mother had spent 3 weeks embroidering, he tore in half like it was paper. My mother cried softly. She'd learned that crying loudly only made things worse, but I, being a child, yelled for him to stop. That was my mistake. The slap I received was so hard I flew across the room, hit my back against the wall. "No daughter of mine yells at me," he roared, his eyes red with alcohol and rage. My mother threw herself between us, shielded me with her body. She took the beating for me that night. The next day, she had a black eye, a split lip, but smiled at me pretending nothing had happened. "It's all right, honey. Daddy was stressed from work, but it's over now. It always passed, and it always came back. It was an endless cycle we lived. Violence, forgiveness, a few days of peace, violence again." The neighbors knew, of course. Fairview was a small town back then. Everybody knew everybody. But no one interfered. "Never get between a man and his wife," they'd say. "Ray's a good man. He's only like that when he drinks. A good man." It's amazing how drinking serves as an excuse for everything. Beat his wife? It was the drink. Beat his daughter? It was the drink. As if the whiskey created the monster out of nothing, instead of just revealing what was already there inside. My mother fell ill when I was 15. It started with a lump in her right breast. She hid it for months, afraid to go to the doctor, afraid of spending money, afraid my father would complain. When she finally went, It was too late. The cancer had spread fast as wildfire. It was 6 months of agony. I watched my mother, who was strong as an oak tree, waste away day by day. Treatment back then was rudimentary. Surgery to remove the breast, medications that did more harm than good. At the end, she weighed less than me, her bones showing through her skin, her eyes sunken but still full of love when they looked at me. Curiously, my father improved during this period. He drank less, came home earlier, even helped care for her. Too late to fix years of violence, but at least it gave her some peace in her final days. On her deathbed, my mother called me close. Her voice was already a whisper, but the words stayed etched in me. "Beth, my girl, promise me you'll leave this house. Promise you'll marry a good man, have your family far from here. Promise you'll be happy." I promised, holding her hand, which was already cold despite the August heat. She died on August 27th, 1960, as the sun was rising. She finally seemed at peace, free from the pain of body and soul. I, at 16, was left alone with the man I feared most in the world. Without my mother to serve as a shield, I became the main target. My father returned to heavy drinking, and the beatings got worse. Now I had to take care of the house, cook, wash, iron, and still endure his outbursts of anger. Anything was reason enough. Too much salt in the food, a poorly ironed shirt, a look he interpreted as defiant. I learned to protect myself as best I could. I hid knives and heavy objects when he came home drunk. I slept with the door locked. I made up excuses for the bruises and cuts. I fell down the stairs, I hit the corner of the table, I slipped in the wet yard. People pretended to believe, but the look of pity gave away that they knew the truth. It was at a farmer's market on a Saturday in March 1962 that my life began to change. I had gone to buy beans and flour for lunch. At Mr. Mitchell's vegetable stand worked a young man I'd never seen before. Tall, strong, with a smile that lit up his tanned face and large hands that knew hard work. "A pretty girl like you deserves a special discount," he said when he saw me, winking charmingly. I laughed for the first time in months. I discovered his name was John Stewart. He was 23, an orphan raised by his aunt and uncle. He had worked since he was a boy and knew the value of honest sweat. Unlike the other young men in town who only thought about partying, John had plans. He wanted to save money, have his own business, build a decent life. We started talking every Saturday at the market. He always kept the best vegetables for me, threw in extras without charging. Our meetings at the market turned into meetings at the park, always with some cousin serving as an alibi. The courtship had to be hidden. If my father found out, it would be the end for both of us. John was everything my father wasn't: gentle, loving, respectful. He never tried anything beyond holding my hand, always treated me like I was fine china. He told jokes to make me laugh, brought little sweets he bought at the market, wrote love notes that I hid in the bottom of my drawer. 6 months later, on a Sunday afternoon when my father had gone out, John appeared at my house. He wore his best clothes, was as nervous as a schoolboy on exam day. He brought his aunt and uncle with him, Mr. Tom and Mrs. Marlene, good people respected in town. When I opened the door, my heart raced. I knew what it meant. "Miss Mary," he began formally, then laughed at his own formality. "Beth, I've come to ask for your hand in marriage. I know your father isn't here, but I'll come back as many times as needed until he agrees." His aunt and uncle confirmed he was an upright young man, hard-working, from a good family despite being an orphan. I explained the delicate situation with my father, the risks of asking permission, but John was determined. "I'm going to get you out of this house, Beth, even if it's the last thing I do." When my father came home that night, I told him about the visit. The reaction was worse than I expected. He broke plates, shouted that no daughter of his would marry just anyone, that I was too young, that men only wanted to take advantage. I got beaten that night for having received John at home, but for the first time, the physical pain didn't matter. I had hope. John came back the following Sunday, and the next, and the next. Always with his aunt and uncle, always respectful, always taking my father's insults without retaliation. The persistence began to work. My father, seeing that the young man wouldn't give up and that the story was already circulating around town, finally gave in, but with conditions. Marry, but she stays here. I won't be alone at my age. And the husband supports her. I don't want a son-in-law asking for anything. John accepted all conditions. To be with me, he would accept anything. But he was already planning our escape, working double shifts, saving money, building our little house far away. We married in June 1963. It was a simple ceremony at St. Joseph's Church, but to me it was fit for a princess. My dress was one my mother had started before she died. I finished the stitching crying over the fabric, feeling her presence in every stitch. John cried when he saw me entering the church. "You look like an angel," he whispered when he took my hand at the altar. The celebration was small, in the backyard of his aunt and uncle's house. My father showed up just for the wedding, already half drunk, made an embarrassing speech about responsibilities of a married man, and left. It didn't matter. I had John now, had a future, had hope. I lived 3 more months in my father's house after getting married. John visited me every day after work, had dinner with us, tense meals with my father grumbling and drinking, took me for walks in the park. Meanwhile, he worked 2 jobs, at the market during the day and at a warehouse at night, saving every penny. In September, 3 months after the wedding, John arrived with a huge smile. "I found our house, Beth. It's not big, but it's ours." It was a small 2-room house on Main Street, rented but with an option to buy. Small, simple, but it seemed like a palace to me. My father was furious when I told him I was moving out. "We agreed you'd live here. A man who doesn't keep his word is no good." But John stood firm for the first time. "We agreed she would continue living here if you treated her well. But you keep drinking, keep being abusive. I won't leave my wife in this situation." The argument heated up. My father came at John with a bottle. But my husband was younger, stronger, more sober. He held his arms, took away the bottle without violence. "I won't fight with you, sir. I'm just taking my wife to safety." We moved that same night. I took few things, some clothes, the wedding dress, photos of my mother. The rest didn't matter. I was free, I was safe, I was starting a new life. The little house was a dream. John had bought some used furniture, a bed, table with 2 chairs, a small wardrobe. I cried when I saw everything arranged with care. On the table, a vase with wildflowers. "To make our house complete," he said, hugging me. I lived the happiest months of my life there. I woke up making coffee for my husband, prepared his lunchbox with all my love. In the afternoon, I took care of the house, planted a small garden in the yard, made sweets to sell and help with expenses. At night, I waited for John to come home. We had dinner talking about our day, made plans for the future. In December 1963, I discovered I was pregnant. John's joy was contagious. He twirled me around our small house, kissed my still flat belly, cried with emotion. "It's going to be a boy, Beth. Strong like his father, beautiful like his mother." He started preparing everything months in advance, painted the small room, made a wooden crib with his own hands, bought baby clothes whenever he could. Raphael was born on March 15, 1964. Difficult delivery, 12 hours of labor. But when I heard his first cry, I forgot all pain. John cried more than the baby when he held his son in his arms. "Look, Beth, he's perfect. He has my nose and your eyes." He was indeed perfect. 7.7 pounds, 19 inches, a head of black hair that looked like it was already combed. From the first day, Raphael showed he was special. He didn't cry without reason, nursed strongly, observed everything with those smart little eyes. My father took a week to meet his grandson. He showed up one afternoon, sober for a change, awkward with the little bundle in his arms. When he saw Raphael, something changed in his hard face. He took the baby carefully, examined every detail. "He's a true Conroy," he said, returning his grandson. "This one will be a real man." From then on, my father began to visit regularly, always sober when he came to see Raphael, which was a miracle. He brought small gifts, a rattle, an outfit, a wooden toy. The grandson achieved what years of pleading from his wife and daughter couldn't, made Raymond Conroy reduce his drinking. Raphael grew up surrounded by love in our little house. John was a doting father. He would come home from work and go straight to pick up his son, talk to him as if he understood everything, sing him to sleep. I divided myself between caring for our treasure and household chores, but it was a sweet routine, full of purpose. At 6 months, Raphael was already sitting up by himself. At 1 year, he walked all over the house, getting into everything. At 2 years, he spoke in complete sentences, asked questions non-stop. He was too smart for his own good. Sometimes I was afraid of so much cleverness in such a small child. My father became another grandfather. Visited every weekend, always bringing something for his grandson. Took Raphael to walk around the market, introduced him to everyone as my genius grandson. The transformation was impressive. The violent man I had known all my life melted in the presence of that boy. But that's a topic for the next chapter. What matters now is that I had my golden years there. Loving husband, healthy son, peace I never knew before. John was thriving at work, already planning to open his own business. Raphael was growing strong and smart. Even my father seemed to have found redemption in his grandson. As the saying goes, poor folks' happiness doesn't last long. But while it lasted, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Who would have thought that the man who terrorized my entire childhood would become a doting grandfather? But that's exactly what happened when Raphael entered his life. It was as if my son had magical powers, transformed my father into a different man, unrecognizable, almost tame. 1970, Raphael was 6 years old. I remember as if it were yesterday him running through the yard chasing chickens, his black hair flying, his laughter echoing through the whole street. John had managed to buy our little house at last. 3 years of religiously paying rent convinced the owner to sell. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We added a room, made a decent yard, planted a mango tree that's still there today. My father visited every weekend without fail. He arrived early on Saturday, always with some treat for his grandson, sometimes a wooden car, sometimes a bag of candy, sometimes a storybook. The drink, which had been his companion for decades, disappeared as if by magic, at least when he was near Raphael. "Grandpa Ray is here," Raphael would shout when he spotted him at the gate. A nickname the boy invented that stuck. Raymond became Ray, and Ray was another man when his grandson was around. That year, Raphael started school. The pride of his teacher from day one, he already knew how to read and write his name, did simple calculations, had an impressive memory. "This boy will go far," Mrs. Carroll would say at meetings. "Intelligent, well-mannered, helpful. You should be proud." John was thriving in business. He left his warehouse job and set up a small store in the neighborhood, then expanded it into a market. Raphael loved to help. At 8 years old, he already knew how to make change, note down credit, talk to customers. He inherited his father's business sense, but there was something more, a natural charisma that won everyone over. My father was a constant presence. He picked Raphael up from school when he could, took him to see the activity at the slaughterhouse, taught him things he thought important for a man to know. "You need to have a steady hand, Raphael," he'd say, showing how to hold a knife. "A real man isn't afraid of blood." I didn't much like these visits to the slaughterhouse, but John said not to worry. "Let the boy learn about the world, Beth. Your father is trying to pass something on to his grandson, in his own way." Raphael at 11 was almost a young man, voice starting to deepen, peach fuzz on his face, but still my baby in his gestures and affection. He continued to excel at school, helped at the market in his spare time, played the guitar John had given him for his birthday. That's when I noticed the first worrying changes in my father. Age catching up, 67 years already, and with it a certain impatience and irritability I hadn't seen in years. He still didn't drink around Raphael, but neighbors commented that he had returned to the bars, to shots of whiskey at the end of the day. "Dad's getting old," I mentioned to John. "I'm worried. It's age, Beth. A man who worked hard his whole life feels it when his body starts to weaken." But it wasn't just age. It was something deeper, as if the old demons had just been sleeping, waiting for the moment to wake up. And they woke up on a 4th of July Sunday, July 1977. School festival. Raphael was going to play guitar in the performance. The whole family gathered. Us, my father, some distant cousins. Beautiful day, colorful decorations, smell of grilled corn and punch in the air. Raphael played beautifully, drew applause. Then he went to play with friends at the booths. My father drank. Not much, but enough. I saw the exact moment when the alcohol found the old demons. His eyes glazed over, his posture changed, his jaw clenched in that way I knew so well. John noticed too, tried to distract him, take him home. There wasn't time. A boy bumped into my father by accident, spilled the cup of punch on his clothes. Silly thing, child's accident. But for someone who had spent decades exploding for any reason, it was a spark in a powder keg. "Damn kid!" His voice came out hoarse, filled with disproportionate rage. The slap he gave the boy echoed throughout the entire yard. The music stopped, conversations died, all eyes turned. The boy on the ground, crying, his face red, marked by my father's fingers. Raphael appeared running. He saw the scene, understood immediately. He did something he had never done. He placed himself between his grandfather and the fallen boy. "No, Grandpa, it was an accident. He didn't mean it." My father looked at his grandson as if he didn't recognize him. For one eternal second, I thought he was going to hit him too. His hand raised, trembling with rage, his face transfigured. But something in Raphael's look, fear mixed with disappointment, made him lower his arm. "Let's go," John said firmly, holding my father by the arm. Now, we left amid the awkward silence. Raphael stayed behind, helping the hurt boy, apologizing for his parents. In the car, my father seemed to deflate, the alcohol evaporating and leaving only shame. "I didn't mean to. The boy provoked me." "The boy is 7 years old," John cut in sharply. "And you're 69. From that day on, something broke between Raphael and his grandfather. My son remained respectful, polite, but the sparkle in his eyes when he saw his grandfather disappeared. The visits became more spaced out, more formal. Raphael made up excuses not to go to the slaughterhouse, not to be alone with him. Raphael turned 16. Handsome young man, popular, intelligent. Finishing high school, already thinking about college. He wanted to be an engineer, build buildings, leave his mark on the world. He was dating a girl from school, Isabella, the dentist's daughter. Future all planned out, full of dreams. My father was getting worse. The drinking returned full force, now mixed with the frustration of age, of a body that wouldn't respond, of a grandson who was drifting away. The outbursts of anger became frequent again, but now alone, in the shack where he had lived since retiring from the slaughterhouse. "We need to put him in rehab, Beth," John suggested more than once. "He's killing himself with drink." "See? But how do you commit someone who doesn't want help?" My father wouldn't admit the problem, said he drank because he wanted to, that he could stop whenever he wished. A lie that every alcoholic tells first to themselves. December 1981. Year-end approaching, busy time at John's market. Raphael helped every day after school, serving customers, organizing stock. Saturday, Christmas Eve, the market was full, everyone shopping for the next day. Late afternoon, sun setting. I was at home preparing the holiday meal, John and Raphael still at the market. That's when I heard the shouting. At first, I thought it was a street fight, common around the holidays. But the shouting continued, increased, and I recognized voices. John, Raphael, my father. I ran to the street barefoot. I saw the crowd in front of the market, people shouting, general confusion. I pushed my way through until I reached the center of the tumult. The scene I saw is forever burned into my memory, seared with a hot iron. Raphael on the ground, blood, so much blood. John kneeling beside him, trying to stop the deep cut on his neck with his hands. My father standing, staggering, a broken bottle in his hand, his glazed eyes not understanding what he had done. "It was him who came at me," my father babbled. "I defended myself. It was self-defense." A lie. Everyone saw. My father entered the market already drunk and agitated, looking for trouble. He complained about the service, the prices, everything. John tried to calm him, asked him to leave. That's when he broke the bottles on the shelf, started shouting that he was being robbed, that his son-in-law was no good. Raphael tried to help his father. He got between the two, tried to hold his grandfather back. That's when it happened. Quick, Brutal, final. The broken bottle found my son's neck. One movement, 1 second, one life. "Mom," Raphael whispered when I knelt beside him, so softly I almost didn't hear. I took his hand, already cold, the warm blood flowing between my fingers. "I'm here, son. Mom's here." But he couldn't hear anymore. His eyes, those intelligent eyes so full of life, went out as I held him. 16 years old, his whole life ahead of him. Killed by his own grandfather, the man he called Grandpa Ray, who taught him to walk, who was his childhood hero. The ambulance came too late. The police came too late. Everything came too late. My father disappeared in the confusion, fled like a rat through the alleys he had known since childhood. John held our dead son, his face a mask of pain I had never seen before. The rest of that night is a blur. Hospital, morgue, police station, words without meaning, manslaughter, intoxication, flight, as if words could explain a grandfather killing his grandson, as if there were words for this. Funeral on Christmas Day. The macabre irony wasn't lost. A day to celebrate birth, we were burying a death. The entire town at the cemetery. Raphael was beloved, had a future, had dreams. Now he only had a white coffin and a shattered mother. John didn't cry at the funeral. He stood like a statue, eyes dry but empty, hands clenched into fists. When they threw the first shovel of dirt, he turned and left. I thought he had gone to the car. I was wrong. I stayed until the end. I watched my son be covered by the red earth of Fairview. Each shovel of dirt was a buried dream. Graduation, wedding, grandchildren that would never come. When it was over, when there was only a mound of fresh earth and flowers wilting in the sun, I rose slowly. At home, I found John sitting at the kitchen table. In front of him, a bottle of whiskey. He who hardly drank. His red eyes weren't from crying. They were from crystallized, finalized rage. "The police won't find him," he said without looking at me. "He knows every hole in this town, has people who help him. He'll run, spend a few years in prison if they catch him, then come back as if nothing happened." "And what can we do?" I asked, my voice a thread. John finally looked at me. What I saw in those eyes frightened and comforted me. The same anger I felt, the same thirst for justice or revenge. At that moment, they were the same thing. We can make our own justice. If the law doesn't punish, we punish. If the law forgets, we remember. If the law forgives, we collect. I looked at my husband, the gentle man who saved me, who built a life with me, who cried with joy when our son was born. Now he was another man. The pain had transformed him, as it transformed me. We were different people. We were parents without a child. We were thirst for revenge in human form. "What do you have in mind?" And there, at that table where Raphael had so often eaten, studied, laughed, there we began to plan what would be our response. It wouldn't be death, that was too merciful. It would be something worse. Something that would mark my father for the rest of his days. Man's justice had failed before even trying. Ours wouldn't fail. The silence of our house after the funeral was deafening. Every corner held a memory of Raphael. The guitar leaning in the corner, the books on the shelf, the empty chair at the table. John and I lived like ghosts, going through mechanical routines without soul. But beneath the pain, something was fermenting. A plan. A need for justice that the law wouldn't provide. January 1982. A month without our son. The police were looking for my father without much effort. He must have fled to the countryside, Mrs. Stewart. Old as he is, he won't go far. Incompetent or complicit. In a small town, you never know where one thing ends and another begins. John changed completely. The man I knew, sweet and patient, became a cold strategist. He spent hours studying maps, making contacts, gathering information. He used every bit of knowledge he had from the business, every favor owed, every friendship cultivated over years of trading. "I discovered he passed through Pikeville last week," he said one night, coming home with a determined look. "Tried to get a job at an underground slaughterhouse. Didn't stay, drank too much, drew attention." The information network John set up was impressive. Truck drivers, market vendors, traveling salesmen, everyone who circulated through rural Kentucky became our eyes and ears. Money helped loosen tongues, but what really worked was the story. A grandfather who killed his own grandson touched the hearts of even the hardest people. February arrived with heavy rains and a solid lead. My father had been seen in Harlan, working under a false name at a cattle ranch. John went to verify personally, came back with absolute certainty. It's him, thin, bearded, but it's him. Drinks every night at the same dive bar. The plan began to take shape. It wouldn't be something impulsive, driven by blind rage. It would be calculated, measured, efficient. John studied every detail: schedules, routines, vulnerable points. I prepared what was necessary: ropes, handcuffs we bought at different stores, ground sleeping pills that I would mix in his drink. "Are you sure about this, Beth?" John asked on the eve of the trip. "Once it starts, there's no turning back." I looked at Raphael's photo frame on the shelf. 16 years old, smiling, full of life. "I'm more sure of this than anything in my life." March, first week. We left on a Thursday, telling the neighbors we were going to visit relatives in Louisville. We took the essentials: changes of clothes, cash, the necessary instruments. The car borrowed from a friend who didn't ask questions completed the disguise. The journey to Harlan was 5 hours of tense silence. John drove concentrating. I wrung my hands in my lap. It wasn't fear. It was anxiety to finally do something, to get out of the paralysis of pain. We arrived in the late afternoon. The town was typical of rural America: streets with small businesses, low houses, modest commerce. The motel where we stayed was simple, but discreet. John went out to do final reconnaissance while I arranged things. "Not tonight," he said when he returned. "There's too much movement at the bar. Tomorrow is Friday. He drinks more, becomes more vulnerable." I spent the night wide awake. It wasn't remorse or doubt. It was the certainty of what was to come. Lying beside John, I felt we were soldiers on the eve of battle. Our private war for justice. Friday, March 8th, 1982. A date that would be etched in me as much as the day of Raphael's death. We spent the day preparing, verifying escape routes, timing everything, reviewing each step. At 6 in the evening we began. The bar was exactly as John described: dirty, poorly lit, smelling of whiskey and sweat. My father was in his usual corner, already on his 5th or 6th glass. The grown beard, the worn clothes, but unmistakable to one who knows. I entered first, disguised with a scarf on my head and dark glasses. I sat close but not too near, ordered a beer I wouldn't drink, waited. John stayed outside, watching. My father drank methodically, lost in thoughts I could only imagine. Was it remorse, fear, or just the emptiness of someone who had lost their humanity? When he got up to go to the bathroom, I acted. The sleeping pills fell into his glass without anyone noticing. He returned, drank it all at once, ordered another. 20 minutes later, he began to stagger more than usual. The bar owner thought it was the drink. "Ray's going overboard today." When he left, almost falling, John and I followed. The poorly lit streets helped. At the first deserted corner, John acted. Quick, efficient. He grabbed my father from behind, hand over his mouth to muffle any scream. He tried to fight, but the medicine and alcohol were taking effect. In seconds, he was unconscious. We carried him to the car. Anyone who saw would think we were helping a drunk. We drove for 2 hours to the place John had chosen. An abandoned farm in the middle of nowhere. No neighbors for miles. The house was as John described. Roof partially collapsed, walls stained with moisture, but solid structure. In what was once the main room, John had prepared everything days before. A reinforced chair, ropes, buckets of water. My father woke up tied, disoriented. It took him a few seconds to focus his eyes, understand where he was, who we were. When he recognized us, terror took over his face. "Beth, John, what are you doing?" "Justice," John replied simply. "The one the law didn't provide. The next details are difficult to tell." Not from remorse, I never regretted it, but because reliving that night is reliving the raw pain of losing Raphael. Feeling again the anger that consumed me. We didn't use extreme physical violence. That wasn't the objective. What we did was worse. We broke him from the inside, destroyed what little humanity remained in him. Words can be sharper than knives when used with precision. We made him relive every detail of that night at the market, every second, from when he entered drunk until the moment the bottle cut Raphael's neck. We repeated it as many times as necessary until we were sure those images would haunt him forever. We showed photos of Raphael, baby, child, teenager. We recounted each of his achievements, each dream destroyed. His first day of school, his first goal in soccer, his first girlfriend. The college he would never attend, the children he would never have. "It should have been you," John shouted. "You should be dead, not him. Miserable old man, wretched drunk." My father cried, begged, asked for forgiveness. Too late. Forgiveness died along with Raphael in that market. The psychological torture lasted all night, calculated pauses for him to regain consciousness when he passed out, water in his face to keep him awake, a hellish carousel of guilt and remorse that we engraved deep in his deteriorated mind. "You will never forget," I said close to his ear. "Every day, every night, you will see his face. You will hear his last breath. You will feel the blood on your hands." Near dawn, we stopped. My father was conscious, but broken. The empty eyes of someone who had seen hell and understood he deserved to be there, exactly as we wanted. "Now you're going to live," John said, removing the restraints. "You'll carry this until you die. Every second will be a reminder of what you did. Every moment will be punishment." We left him there, sprawled on the floor. We returned to the motel, gathered our things, disappeared. The revenge wasn't in death. It was in life. A life of internal torment, of corrosive guilt, of memories that would never let him rest. We learned later through our network of informants that it worked. My father gradually went insane. He wandered the streets muttering Raphael's name, woke up screaming from nightmares, saw his grandson's face everywhere. Alcohol no longer helped. It only made the visions worse. He became homeless within months. Jobs didn't last because his breakdowns frightened everyone. He slept on the streets, ate from garbage, sank deeper each day. Exactly the end he deserved. John and I returned to Fairview as if nothing had happened. We resumed our routine, him at the market, me at home. But we were different people. The revenge didn't bring Raphael back, but it gave purpose to our pain. Years passed. Life continued, harsh and empty without our son. The market went bankrupt in 1985. John lost interest, lost care. He found a job as a night watchman. I sewed for people, like my mother used to do. We survived. In 1987, we received news. My father had died in Jackson, found in an alley. Malnutrition, cirrhosis, insanity. The medical report listed various causes. I didn't go to the funeral. There was nothing to bury besides the body. His soul had died that night 5 years before. John died in 2003. Heart attack while sleeping. I was the one who found him in the morning, serene as I'd never seen him in life. I think he finally rested. I was with him when he left, holding his hand as I had held Raphael's. I was alone then, 59 years old, widowed, childless. I could have sunk into bitterness, into loneliness, but something in me resisted. Perhaps the same strength that made me survive my childhood with my father, that helped me find love with John, that gave me the courage to seek justice. Today, at 79, I look back without romanticism. What we did was cruel? Yes. Necessary? Also, yes. Official justice failed us. We created our own. Did it work? My father paid every second until he died. I don't recommend our path to anyone. Revenge doesn't heal the pain, it only transfers it. Raphael remains dead. The hole in my chest remains open. But at least I know his killer didn't live unpunished. That's what lets me sleep at night. That's what makes me face each morning. The certainty that, when the law failed, we didn't fail. When official justice turned its back, we created our own. Right or wrong, it was our choice. And we lived with it until the end. That dawn in Harlan changed everything. Not the pain, which remained as raw as the first day. Not the longing, which increased with the passing of time, but it changed something fundamental in me and John. We took revenge out of God's hands and did it ourselves, and it worked in a way we hadn't imagined. We returned to Fairview as if nothing had happened. The neighbors thought we had gone to visit relatives in Louisville, believed in the discreet mourning we carried. But inside we were different. The gentle couple everyone knew now carried a dark secret and the bitter satisfaction of having done justice. The first news came slowly. An acquaintance who traveled a lot mentioned in casual conversation. They saw a crazy old man in Harlan walking around shouting a boy's name, Raphael it seems. They say he's haunted, that he sees the dead boy everywhere. John and I looked at each other without showing anything. It was working. The seeds we had planted that night were germinating, growing, taking over my father's already deteriorated mind. Each piece of information that came confirmed it. He was paying the way we wanted. April 1982. Life followed its cruel routine of normality. John opened the market every morning. I took care of the too-empty house. Raphael's room remained untouched, a mutual and silent decision to preserve something of him. The guitar in the same place, the books waiting for a reader who would never return. It was on a Thursday afternoon that a man I didn't know arrived at my house. Tall, thin, scraggly beard, simple but clean clothes. He knocked on the gate politely, removed his hat when I opened it. "Mrs. Stewart, my name is Frank. I'm from Harlan. I need to talk to you about your father." My blood froze. Was it the police? Had someone discovered? John was at the market. I was alone. But something in the man's look, fatigue mixed with compassion, made me open the gate. We sat on the porch. Frank accepted the coffee I offered, drank slowly before speaking. "I work at the Harlan Hospital. Your father was admitted yesterday. He's not well in the head, ma'am." "What's wrong with him?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "The doctors say it's alcoholic psychosis mixed with severe trauma. He has terrible hallucinations. He constantly sees a dead boy. Cries for forgiveness, cries like a child. Yesterday he tried to jump from the hospital roof, said the boy was calling him." I drank my coffee without showing anything. Inside, I felt a cold satisfaction. It was working better than we had planned. The psychological torture we applied that night had taken root, grown, consumed what little sanity remained in him. "Why did you come to tell me this?" I finally asked. Frank hesitated. "When he's lucid, which is rare, he repeats your name. Says his daughter needs to forgive him, that he can't die without forgiveness. The doctors thought perhaps you'd want—" "I don't want to," I cut sharply. "He knows what he did. If he's suffering, it's the consequence of his own actions. I have no forgiveness to give." The man nodded slowly, as if he understood. He finished his coffee, stood up. "I'll say I couldn't find you. But ma'am, if I may, sometimes forgiveness is more for ourselves than for the other person. Thank you for the advice. But some things are unforgivable." He left. I never saw him again. But the news continued to arrive in the following months. My father escaped from the hospital, became homeless. He wandered through the small towns of the region, always fleeing from something only he could see. Raphael's ghost, created by us that night, was his constant companion. John became obsessed with tracking his whereabouts. He created a network of informants, truck drivers, traveling salesmen, people who circulated throughout Kentucky. He paid for any news, any sighting. "I need to know he's paying," he would say on sleepless nights. The market began to go downhill. John lost focus, lost care for the business. The obsession with tracking my father consumed time, energy, money. Customers noticed the neglect, went to the competition. Debts accumulated. "John, you need to forget him," I tried to argue. "We've already done what needed to be done. It's not over yet," he would reply, with the sunken eyes of someone who wasn't sleeping properly. "It only ends when he dies. Until then, I need to know." The last substantial news came in December 1983. My father had been seen in Jackson, thinner, crazier, more broken down. He slept under bridges, ate garbage, talked to himself all the time. People were afraid of him. They thought he was haunted, possessed. "He calls for Raphael all the time," said the truck driver who brought the information. "Asks forgiveness, cries, begs. Sometimes he screams as if someone was hurting him. It's almost pitiful, ma'am. Pity. I didn't feel pity. I felt that justice continued to be done day after day, night after night. The torment we created that dawn in Harlan had become his eternal companion, exactly as we planned. The market closed. John sold everything to pay debts. We were left with just the house. He found work as a night watchman at a factory. Hard work for a 45-year-old man, but it was what was available. I went back to sewing, like my mother did. Life became tight, but we survived. On a winter night, John came home from work different. Lighter, as if he had taken weight off his shoulders. He sat at the kitchen table, looked at me for a long time before speaking. Enough, Beth. I'm going to stop looking for news about him. It's consuming me, destroying us. Raphael wouldn't want this. It was true. The obsession was slowly killing us. The revenge had been carried out, justice applied. Continuing to track my father's every step was prolonging our own suffering. You're right, I agreed. Let's try to live what's left. It was a difficult but necessary decision. John stopped paying informants, stopped asking about my father. We focused on surviving, on carrying our pain with some dignity. Routine helped. Work, home, attempt at normality. 1985, 1986 passed in this attempt at reconstruction. We made small renovations to the house. I planted a garden in the yard. John made friends with other watchmen. It wasn't happiness. That died with Raphael. But it was life. Or something like it. May. I was sewing a skirt when someone knocked at the gate. It was Mr. Anthony, an acquaintance who traveled a lot. He had a strange, uncomfortable expression. Mrs. Stewart, I have news about your father. I don't want to know, I replied automatically. I've already said that. He died. The words hung in the air. Died. The man who terrorized me in childhood, who killed my son, who destroyed my family. Died. How? I asked, more from reflex than interest. They found the body in an alley in Jackson. It had been there for a few days. Malnutrition, cirrhosis, exposure to the elements. The report says it was multiple organ failure. But those who saw him in recent times say it was insanity. He died calling a boy's name, Raphael. I thanked him for the information, closed the gate. I stood in the living room, processing. My father was dead. The revenge had reached its natural end. I felt neither relief nor sadness, just a strange emptiness, like when you finish a book you read out of obligation, not pleasure. John came home from work that night, and I told him. We sat on the porch, in silence, each with our own thoughts. There was no celebration or lamentation. It was simply the end of a horrible chapter in our lives. We did what we had to do, John finally said. We did, I agreed. And it worked, but it didn't bring him back. No, nothing would. We stayed there until late, 2 parents without a child, 2 avengers with no one left to avenge. Justice had been done in our twisted and cruel way. My father paid until his last day of life, but the victory tasted like ashes. The following years were of slow deterioration. John never fully recovered. The weight of what we did, added to the loss of Raphael, took its toll. He became quieter, more distant. The watchman work, the sleepless nights, age, everything contributed. In 1995, he had his first heart attack, small but frightening. The doctor recommended rest, less stress. How to explain that the stress came from within, from memories, from guilt and pain mixed together? I don't regret it, he would say on nights of insomnia. I would do it all again. But sometimes I wonder if Raphael would approve. It was a question without an answer. Raphael was sweet, gentle, incapable of malice. Would he have forgiven his grandfather? Would he have understood our thirst for revenge? We'll never know. January. John had the second heart attack, this one fatal. He died in his sleep, his face finally at peace. I buried him next to Raphael, father and son together again. At the funeral, few people. The years had taken friends, acquaintances. I was left practically alone. Alone with my memories, my secrets, my certainties and doubts. The house too empty, the silence too heavy. But I continued, out of stubbornness perhaps, or because stopping would be admitting final defeat. Today, at 79, I sit on this same porch and think about everything. The violence of my childhood that generated more violence. The love I found with John. The perfect son we had and lost. The revenge we executed with surgical precision. Was it right? Was it wrong? It's not for me to judge anymore. I did what I thought necessary at the time. John, too. My father paid in an exemplary way for the heinous crime he committed. Raphael remains dead, but at least he didn't die unpunished. If I could go back in time, would I change anything? Maybe I would try to get my father into rehab sooner, treat the alcoholism, break the cycle. But maybe it wouldn't have helped. Some people carry violence in their soul, and alcohol only releases what already exists. What I know is that I lived. I loved, hated, suffered, avenged. I experienced the extremes of the human condition. I made terrible choices and lived with the consequences. I'm neither heroine nor villain. I'm just a woman who did what she thought just when official justice failed. That's what I want you to understand. I'm not here to give moral lessons or seek absolution. I'm telling my story because it needs to be told. Because somewhere, right now, another family may be living through a similar drama. And for those people, my advice is contradictory. Seek legal justice first. Exhaust all official possibilities. But if, like us, you are abandoned by the system, remember, you are not alone. Others have walked this dark path before. It's not an easy path. Revenge exacts its price, leaves marks, changes who you are. But sometimes, in extreme situations, it's the only possible path. It's up to each person to decide if it's worth paying that price. For me, it was worth it. I sleep peacefully knowing my father died tormented by the crime he committed. That Raphael's ghost, created by our hands that night in Harlan, was his companion until the end. Justice? Revenge? In the end, what's the difference when your child is dead and the killer is your own father? 43 years have passed since that night in Harlan. 43 years carrying the weight of what we did. The secret I shared only with John. Now at 79, sitting on this porch where I watched my son grow up and from which I left to avenge his death, it's time to talk about the consequences, about the aftermath, about the real price of revenge. 2003 was the year I became truly alone. John passed away in January, taking with him half of my story. At the funeral, few people. Time had taken friends, distanced acquaintances. I buried him next to Raphael, father and son reunited in death as they were separated in life. I returned to the empty house and asked myself, what now? At 59, widowed, childless, without close family, carrying a secret that weighed more each year. The pension barely allowed me to survive, the house needed repairs, my body was beginning to pay the price of difficult years. That's when I discovered something surprising. I was stronger than I thought. Perhaps the same strength that made me survive childhood with my father, that gave me courage to execute our revenge, was still there. I began to sow more, taking orders from neighbors. I planted a larger garden in the yard, sold vegetables at the market. I survived. One Sunday morning, someone knocked at my gate. When I opened it, I almost fell backward. There stood Maria, daughter of my distant cousin, whom I hadn't seen in decades. But that's not what shocked me. It was the boy beside her, about 15 years old, his face a perfect copy of my Raphael at the same age. Aunt Mary? It's me, Maria. This is my son Peter. We need help. The story was common and sad. Violent husband, alcohol, abuse. She had fled with her son, had nowhere to go. She remembered me, the big house, thought that maybe, the irony hit me like a punch. There I was, who had executed terrible revenge against domestic violence, being sought as refuge by another victim. I looked at the boy again, Peter, the same name as the grandson I lost, the same eyes, the same way of tilting his head. I don't believe in reincarnation, but at that moment, it seemed the universe was giving me a second chance. Come in, I said simply. There are empty rooms, food in the refrigerator. Stay as long as you need. Peter adapted quickly. Intelligent, polite, affectionate young man. He helped in the garden, carried groceries, talked with me for hours. It was like having Raphael back, but different. This Peter carried his own scars, his own fears. One night, he asked me about the photos on the shelf. I told him about Raphael, about how he died. I didn't tell him about the revenge. That secret would die with me. Peter listened attentively, his eyes watering. "You must have suffered a lot," he said finally. "Losing a son like that, I suffered. But I survived. That's what we do, Peter. We survive." Maria found a job in a store. Peter started school. The house had life again. Laughter, conversations, movement. I cooked with pleasure again, spent afternoons helping Peter with his lessons. It was almost like a second chance, an alternative life where the tragedies hadn't happened. Peter graduated high school, got a scholarship to a college in Louisville. Engineering, like Raphael dreamed. The day he left, I cried, as I hadn't cried since John's death. But they were different tears, of pride, of fulfillment, of a cycle completing. Maria stayed. We had created an unlikely family, two women marked by male violence, united by necessity and choice. She cared for me as I aged. I offered the safety she never had. Peter graduated, found a job at a large construction company, married a good woman, had children. They visited me whenever they could. The great-grandchildren, because that's what they called me, ran through the yard like Raphael did, climbed the same tree, laughed at the same jokes. It was during one of these visits that Peter asked me the question I had feared for years. "Grandma, what happened to Raphael's murderer? Was justice served?" I looked at that face so similar to my dead son's and made a decision. I would tell part of the truth, not all. "It was served, Peter. In its own way, but it was. He died insane, tormented by the crime. He never had peace after what he did. Did you forgive him?" "No. Some things are unforgivable, but I learned to live with it, not to let hatred consume me. It was difficult, but necessary." He nodded, seeming to understand. He never brought up the subject again. The pandemic arrived, the world stopped. I was isolated for months. Only Maria could visit me. It was a time of forced reflection, of revisiting memories, of making peace with some decisions. I didn't regret the revenge. I would never regret it. But I understood that carrying the secret alone was unnecessary. I began to write. Not everything, not the sordid details, but the essence, the violence that generates violence, the justice that fails, the impossible choices we sometimes have to make. It was cathartic to put it on paper, even if no one would read it. My honorary grandson, Peter's son, taught me about the internet, YouTube, these modern things. He said life stories interested people, that I should share mine. I resisted at first. A 79-year-old woman on the computer? But he insisted, helped me, recorded the first videos, and here we are. I, Mary, telling you a story that I kept for 4 decades. Not complete, some secrets die with us, but true in what matters. A story about love and hate, about justice and revenge, about the extreme choices that ordinary people make in extreme situations. I don't seek absolution. I don't offer moral lessons. I simply share my truth in the hope that it helps someone, somewhere, who is going through something similar. Domestic violence still kills. Justice still fails. Victims are still abandoned by the system. But I want you to know, you are not alone. Others have gone through this. Others have made terrible choices and survived to tell about it. The pain doesn't go away, but it lessens. The scars don't disappear, but they stop bleeding. Today, at 79, I can say that I lived. Not the life I planned, not the life I dreamed of, but the life that circumstances gave me. I loved deeply, hated with the same intensity. I knew the supreme happiness of being a mother and the unbearable pain of losing a child. I took justice into my own hands when the law abandoned me. Right or wrong, it's not for me to judge anymore. Each person can draw their own conclusions. What I know is that I've slept peacefully for 43 years knowing my father paid, day after day, night after night, for the heinous crime he committed. Raphael's ghost that we created that night in Harlan was his executioner more efficient than any prison. For those who judge me harshly, I don't blame you. It's easy to have high moral principles when it's not your child dead on the floor. It's simple to preach forgiveness when you weren't the one who held the still warm body, who saw life drain from the eyes you watched being born. For those who understand, who recognize the pain behind the choices, thank you. You know that sometimes life takes us down paths we would never voluntarily choose. That sometimes doing the right thing is not an option. My time is running out. Not life. Apparently us countrywomen are hard to kill. But energy to carry secrets, to pretend remorse I don't feel. That's why I decided to tell this story now, while I still can, while memory is still sharp. If my story touched you in any way, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel to follow other stories on grandparents' tales. And more importantly, share with someone who might need to hear it. We're not here to glorify violence. We're here to say you're not alone, that the pain you feel is valid, that the anger is understandable, that sometimes, just sometimes, justice comes through twisted paths. Each story on our channel is a testimony of survival, of people who didn't bow down, who didn't accept the unacceptable, who took into their hands what the system denied them. We're not saints or demons, we're just humans pushed to the limit. To finish, I want to leave a message for you who are going through a similar situation, who are afraid, who feel abandoned by justice, who are thinking of doing something drastic. Think hard. Think twice, 3 times, 1,000 times, because once done, there's no going back. You will carry it for the rest of your life. It will change who you are. But if, after thinking all this, you still believe it's the only way, know that others have walked this road before and survived. I'm not an example for anyone. I'm just Mary, 79 years old, who lost a son to her own father and made him pay in a way that to this day I wonder if it was too much or too little, who lived with this secret for 43 years and now, at the end of the line, decided it needs to be told, because in the end, we are all human, capable of the best and the worst, of the purest love and the blackest hatred, of infinite compassion and calculated cruelty. That's what defines us, this capacity for extremes. I lived in the extremes, loved to the extreme, hated to the extreme, avenged to the extreme. I don't recommend it to anyone, but I don't regret it either. I did what I thought necessary with the tools I had at the time. Let God judge me. Men no longer matter. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for not judging or for judging in silence. Thank you for allowing this old woman to share the weight she carried alone for so long. Now I'll rest. Tomorrow there's a garden to tend, great-grandchildren to receive, life to live. Because in the end, that's what we do. We live. Despite everything, because of everything, we live. And Raphael, my beloved son, wherever you are, Mom did what she thought was right. I hope you understand. I hope you forgive. I hope to meet you again when my time comes. Until then, I remain here. Mary Conroy Stewart, 79 years old, mother without a child, retired avenger, survivor by choice and stubbornness. May God have mercy on us all.